The Beverly Hills church was steeped in sorrow, the cloying scent of lilies thick in the heavy air. Lorraine Carter stood by Edward Harrington's polished coffin, her trembling hands grazing its glossy wood. Nathan and Olivia wailed loudly for the crowd, but their sly smirks betrayed a darker truth. When she signs, it's all ours. Then Lorraine's phone buzzed. A single message seared the screen, freezing her blood. Don't trust anyone. Her heart pounded. Who sent it? Edward? Or someone else? She whispered for the coffin to be opened, fear clutching her chest. Gasps echoed as the lid creaked up, revealing nothing. Before the stunned silence could break, the church doors flung open. Who sent the chilling message? Is Edward truly alive? What secrets hide in the empty coffin? Stay to uncover a tale of greed, deception, and a black woman's unbreakable resolve. The hospital's sterile walls closed in around Lorraine Carter like a vice, the antiseptic sting in the air doing nothing to dull the panic clawing at her chest. She'd been in the kitchen, hands dusted with flour from baking Edward's favorite cornbread, when the phone call came. A nurse's clipped voice reporting his car accident on the Pacific Coast Highway. Now her legs trembled as she stumbled through the corridors of Cedars-Sinai, the elite medical center where the wealthy came to heal or hide. Edward, her anchor, her love of 25 years, was somewhere beyond those double doors, fighting for his life. Or so she thought. Her heart pounded, each beat a desperate plea for him to hold on, but the world felt unsteady, as if the ground might betray her next. She pushed into the emergency ward, the chaos of beeping monitors and hurried footsteps assaulting her senses. And then she saw them, Nathan and Olivia, her adopted children, standing in the hallway, their faces taut with something that wasn't quite grief. Lorraine's breath caught. She hadn't called them. No one had. "I didn't phone you," she said, her voice quivering with confusion. "How did you know to come here?" Nathan, his blonde hair slicked back like the polished lawyer he'd never become, opened his mouth, then closed it, his blue eyes darting to Olivia. "The hospital called me," he stammered, his hands fidgeting with his cufflinks. Olivia, her fair skin flushed, cut in too quickly. "No, Dad's driver told me, and I called Nathan." Their words tripped over each other, a tangle of lies that hung sharp in the air, as jarring as the monitor's relentless beeps. Lorraine's gaze locked onto their faces, searching for the children she'd raised, the ones she'd cradled through nightmares in that cramped orphanage decades ago. Nathan, once a boy with a shy smile, now carried the hard edge of a man who'd gambled away his father's trust. Olivia, whose laughter had once filled their home, now wore a designer dress that screamed wealth she hadn't earned, their eyes flickering with something sinister, guilt perhaps, or calculation, sent a cold seed of doubt rooting deep in Lorraine's chest. She'd seen that look before, in the sneers of Beverly Hills elites who whispered she didn't belong in Edward's world, a black woman too plain for their gilded circles. But from her own children, the betrayal cut deeper than any stranger's scorn. "Mrs. Carter," a nurse interrupted, her glance lingering on Lorraine's dark skin, with a flicker of judgment. "Your husband's in critical condition. Only immediate family, one at a time." Lorraine nodded, barely hearing, her mind snagged on Nathan's shifty glance and Olivia's hurried excuse. She followed the nurse, her steps heavy, as memories of Edward flooded in. She saw him as he was 25 years ago, standing outside her hospital shift in Compton, his smile warm against the dusk. "Lorraine, you're my home," he'd said, his voice soft but sure, defying the world that saw their love as a scandal. They'd built a life together, from a modest apartment to a sprawling Beverly Hills estate, weathering the whispers of those who called her an outsider. Edward, a billionaire with a heart too big for his wealth, had chosen her, and she him, against all odds. Now in the ICU, Edward lay tethered to machines, his face obscured by bandages, his chest rising faintly under the weight of tubes. Lorraine took his hand, the only part of him untouched by the crash, and squeezed. "Edward, my love, I'm here," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You're going to make it." For a moment she felt a faint twitch in his fingers, a flicker of the man who'd fought for her. But the monitors droned on, indifferent, and the nurse's voice cut through. 5 minutes, ma'am. Lorraine's tears fell, each one a prayer, but her mind churned with questions. Edward was meticulous, his car a fortress of maintenance. A crash made no sense. Not unless someone had wanted it to happen. Back in the hallway, Nathan and Olivia lingered, their presence an unwelcome shadow. Nathan was on his phone, his voice low, talking about insurance policies. Already. Olivia adjusted her pearls, her eyes avoiding Lorraine's. "Mom, he's in bad shape," Nathan said, his tone too practiced, his embrace as cold as the hospital tiles. "The doctors say it was a brake failure." Lorraine's stomach twisted. Brake failure? Edward's driver checked the car daily. She wanted to scream, to demand answers, but their shifty glances held her back. "Who called you?" She pressed again, her voice sharper now. Olivia's smile faltered, her eyes darting to Nathan. "Like I said, the driver," she mumbled, but the lie was a splinter in Lorraine's heart. As she left the hospital, driven home by a neighbor who'd heard the news, Lorraine's mind raced. The elite world of Beverly Hills, with its glittering facades and hidden knives, had never welcomed her. She'd endured the sidelong glances, the whispered slurs at galas, but she'd thought her children were different. Nathan and Olivia, whom she and Edward had chosen, loved, raised. They were her family, weren't they? Yet their lies in that hallway, their too quick presence, gnawed at her. She remembered a night years ago, under the stars on their estate's balcony, when Edward had held her close. "If anything happens to me, Lorraine, trust your heart," he'd said, his eyes searching hers. "It's stronger than their world." Now that strength was all she had, a fragile shield against a truth she wasn't ready to face. But the seed of doubt had taken root, and it was growing. Lorraine Carter stood alone in the cavernous Beverly Hills church, the weight of her grief as heavy as the lily's cloying scent. The polished pews gleamed under stained glass light, but to her, they were a cold stage for a masquerade of mourning. Her black dress, simple and worn, clung to her like a second skin, marking her as an outsider among the elite mourners in their tailored suits and veiled hats. Edward's coffin loomed before her, its mahogany surface sealed tight, a barrier between her and the man who'd been her world. Her fingers grazed the wood, trembling with the ache of loss, seeking some trace of him. But the seed of doubt planted in that sterile hospital corridor had taken root, its tendrils curling through her heart. Nathan and Olivia's shifty glances, their tangled lies, those images haunted her, sharper than the organ's mournful notes. The congregation whispered, their eyes darting to Lorraine's dark skin with barely concealed judgment. She felt their stares, the same ones she'd endured at galas where she'd clung to Edward's arm, a black woman daring to love a billionaire. "She doesn't belong," their glances said, as if her love for Edward was a trespass in their gilded world. But it was Nathan and Olivia, her adopted children, who cut deepest. They stood near the coffin, their sobs loud enough for the crowd, but Lorraine's gaze caught the truth. Nathan's broad shoulders shook theatrically, his blonde head bowed, yet his eyes flicked to Olivia with a glint of calculation. Olivia, draped in black silk, clutched a handkerchief, but her lips twitched with a stifled smirk, her fair skin glowing with something far from grief. Lorraine's heart twisted, a fresh wound opening as she watched them. She remembered the day she and Edward had brought them home from the orphanage, Nathan's shy grin and Olivia's tiny hand in hers. They'd been her children, her pride, raised with love in a home where wealth never overshadowed warmth. But somewhere along the way, that love had soured. Nathan's ambition had turned to greed, his dreams of wealth drowning out the lessons Edward taught. Olivia, once her shadow, had learned to scorn Lorraine's simplicity, her designer dresses a shield against their modest beginnings. Their disdain, rooted in her race, had grown like a weed, choking the family they'd built. As the pastor droned about eternal rest, Lorraine's mind churned. Edward's car crash made no sense. He was meticulous, his Bentley a fortress of precision. Brake failure? The lie gnawed at her, echoing Nathan's too quick explanation in the hospital. She glanced at them again, catching their whispered exchange. When she signs, it's all ours. Olivia's voice was a hiss, barely audible, but it struck Lorraine like a blade. Nathan's nod, his smirk hidden behind a handkerchief, confirmed it. They were plotting, their grief a performance for the mourners. Her chest tightened, the air in the church turning to ice. Were they capable of more than lies? Could they have caused Edward's crash? Her phone buzzed in her purse, a sharp jolt that snapped her from her thoughts. She fumbled for it, her hands trembling as she opened the message from an unknown number. The words seared her eyes, stopping her heart. "I am still alive. Trust no one." Lorraine's breath caught, the world tilting as if the church's marble floor had cracked beneath her. Edward, alive. The possibility was a wildfire, burning through her grief, her doubt, her fear. She stared at the coffin, its sealed lid now a question mark, a lie in itself. Was it empty? Her pulse roared, drowning out the pastor's voice. She wanted to scream, to demand answers, but the mourner's eyes pinned her in place, their judgment a silent chain. She clutched the phone, her lifeline to a truth she couldn't yet grasp. Nathan and Olivia's whispers grew louder in her mind, their smirks a poison spreading through her veins. She remembered a night on their estate's balcony, Edward's arms around her as they watched the city lights. "Lorraine, you're stronger than their world," he'd said, his voice a shield against the elite's scorn. Now that strength was her only weapon. She glanced at her children. No, not children anymore, but strangers wearing their faces. They lie in the hospital, their scheming here, were threads in a tapestry she was only beginning to see. Lorraine's fingers tightened around the phone, the message a burning coal in her palm. She couldn't confront them here, not with the crowd watching, their prejudice ready to paint her as the hysterical Black Widow. But the doubt had grown into a fire, and she would not let it consume her. Edward's words echoed, "Trust your heart." She would. She would find the truth, no matter how dark, no matter who it damned. As the organ swelled, Lorraine stood taller, her grief now laced with resolve. The church's whispers faded, replaced by a vow. She would unravel the lies, for Edward, for their love, for the family they'd tried to build. The coffin before her held no answers, but the message in her hand did, and she would follow it wherever it led. Lorraine Carter's hands still trembled from the weight of that message. "I am still alive. Trust no one." As she sat in the dim study of their Beverly Hills estate, the silence pressing against her like a living thing. The funeral's echoes lingered, Nathan's theatrical sobs, Olivia's stifled smirk, the chilling words that had seared her soul. Her grief was a raw wound, but the doubt that had taken root in the church now bloomed into something sharper, a blade of suspicion cutting through her heart. Edward, her anchor, her love, might be alive. Or was it a cruel trick? The possibility gnawed at her, each thought a splinter in her mind. She couldn't shake the image of her adopted children, their whispered glee a poison that tainted the family she'd fought to build. Their betrayal, laced with the elite's disdain for her black skin, burned deeper than she could bear. She rose, her steps heavy, and approached Edward's desk, its polished surface a relic of their shared dreams. Her fingers brushed the leather blotter, seeking answers in the space where he'd spent countless nights planning their future. She opened a drawer, her heart pounding, and found a folder marked with his precise handwriting. Inside was his will, rewritten months ago, its words a shock that stole her breath. 80% of his billion-dollar fortune was to fund medical clinics for underserved communities, with only a modest sum for Nathan and Olivia. Lorraine's chest tightened. Edward had known their greed, had seen the strangers they'd become. But then she found the insurance policy, $150 million with Nathan and Olivia as primary beneficiaries, signed just weeks before his crash. Her hands shook, the paper a betrayal in itself. Why hadn't he told her? What had they done to him? The room spun, memories flooding in. She saw Edward at a charity gala, his hands steady in hers as whispers followed them. "She's not one of us." Lorraine had smiled through the pain, her love for him a shield against their scorn. But Nathan and Olivia had learned that scorn, their eyes mirroring the elite's judgment. She remembered Nathan's sneer when she served collard greens at dinner. Too rustic for us, Mom. Olivia's refusal to hug her, citing sweat stains on Lorraine's nurse's uniform, had cut deeper than any slur. They'd rejected her, not just for her simplicity, but for her skin, her place in their world, a stain they wanted erased. Now this will and insurance policy painted a darker picture. Had they orchestrated Edward's crash to claim that fortune? Her phone buzzed again. Another message from the unknown number. Meet me at the Sunset Cafe. Samuel Reed. I have answers. Lorraine's pulse raced, hope and fear warring within her. Who was Samuel Reed? Could he unravel the lies? She called Marcus, her old friend from her nursing days, a black former cop whose gruff voice had always grounded her. Lorraine, you okay? He asked, concern thick in his tone. She told him about the message, the will, and the insurance. I'm coming with you, he said, with no hesitation. This smells wrong. His words were a lifeline, pulling her from the abyss of doubt. At the Sunset Cafe, a quiet diner tucked away from Beverly Hills glitz, Lorraine and Marcus met Samuel Reed, a wiry man with sharp eyes and a worn trench coat. Mrs. Carter, he said, his voice low, Edward hired me months ago. He suspected Nathan and Olivia were after his money. Lorraine's heart sank, a fresh wave of betrayal washing over her. Samuel slid a recorder across the table. Listen to this. The device crackled, and Nathan's voice filled the air, cold and calculated. The insurance is set. We just need him out of the way. Olivia's laugh followed, sharp as glass. Once he's gone, she'll be easy to handle. Lorraine's breath hitched, tears stinging her eyes. Her children, the ones she'd raised with every ounce of her heart, had planned to kill Edward, and perhaps her next. She clutched Marcus's hand, his steady grip anchoring her as the recording played on. Samuel's eyes softened. Edward knew their greed, he said. He changed the will to protect you, to protect his legacy. He wanted me to watch them, to keep you safe. Lorraine's mind reeled, the weight of Edward's foresight a bittersweet comfort. She saw him in their garden, years ago, teaching Nathan to plant roses, his voice gentle. Love grows where you nurture it. But Nathan had scoffed, and Olivia had wandered off, their hearts already turning to stone. Now their greed had woven a noose, and Lorraine felt its shadow tightening around her. She left the cafe, her resolve hardening like steel. The elite world that shunned her, the children who betrayed her, they would not break her. Edward's love, his trust in her, was a fire in her soul. She would follow Samuel's lead, uncover every lie, and protect the legacy they'd built together. The insurance policy, the will, Nathan's cold voice, they were pieces of a puzzle she was determined to solve. As she stepped into the night, the city's lights glittering like a false promise, Lorraine vowed to fight, for Edward, for truth, for the love that had defied a world that never wanted her. Lorraine Carter's resolve burned like a quiet flame as she stood in the shadowed study of their Beverly Hills estate, the echo of Samuel Reed's recording still searing her mind. Nathan's cold voice, we just need him out of the way. And Olivia's sharp laugh had carved a wound deeper than grief, a betrayal that turned her love for her adopted children to ash. The will and insurance policy she'd found, coupled with their whispered scheming at the funeral, painted a grim picture, but she needed more proof to shatter the lies. Her heart ached not just for Edward's uncertain fate, but for the family she'd poured her soul into, now strangers plotting her ruin. The elite world's disdain, their sneers at her black skin, paled against this treachery from her own children. She was no longer just a widow, she was a warrior, and she would fight for the truth. She turned to Edward, safe, hidden behind a portrait of their first dance, her fingers trembling as she dialed the combination. Her birthday, a secret only they shared. The door clicked open, revealing a velvet-lined compartment. Inside was an envelope, sealed with Edward's precise script, for Lorraine, my heart. Her breath hitched, tears stinging as she tore it open. The letter was a lifeline, his words leaping from the page. Lorraine, if you're reading this, I'm in danger. Nathan and Olivia pushed for the insurance increase. I don't trust their intentions. I've hired Samuel Reed to watch them. Trust no one but him? I love you, always. Her world tilted, the paper trembling in her hands. Edward had known, had seen the greed in their eyes, the same greed she'd been blind to, clouded by a mother's love. Lorraine clutched the letter, her heart a storm of pain and fury. She saw Edward in their garden years ago, his silver hair catching the sunlight as he taught Olivia to prune roses. "They'll bloom if you care for them," he'd said, his voice warm. But Olivia had rolled her eyes, her fair skin flushed with impatience, already dreaming of wealth she hadn't earned. Nathan, too, had drifted away, his boyish curiosity replaced by a hunger for status that mirrored the elite's disdain for Lorraine's roots. Their rejection of her, her cooking, her warmth, her blackness, had been a slow poison, but this letter was a blade, cutting through her illusions. Had they caused his crash? The thought was a weight, crushing her chest, yet fueling her resolve. She called Marcus, her voice steady despite the storm within. "I found a letter," she said, reading Edward's words. "Meet me at Samuel's office. We need more." Marcus, ever her rock, agreed without question, his gruff tone a comfort. At Samuel Reed's cramped office, tucked in a nondescript strip mall far from Beverly Hills glamour, Lorraine felt the weight of her mission. Samuel, his sharp eyes scanning her face, slid a recorder across his desk. "Edward wanted you to hear this," he said. The device crackled, and Nathan's voice emerged, chillingly calm. "The mechanics paid. The brakes will fail by morning." Olivia's giggle followed. "And the pills in his coffee will make sure he doesn't notice." Lorraine's blood ran cold, her fingers digging into her palms. Her children, her babies, had planned to kill Edward, their father, for money. Tears spilled down her cheeks, each one a shard of her shattered love. She remembered rocking Olivia to sleep, her tiny hand clutching Lorraine's finger. Nathan's laughter as Edward tossed him in the air, a boy who'd called her mom with trust. How had they become monsters? Samuel's voice broke through. "Edward suspected them for months. He hired me to protect you, to gather proof." Lorraine nodded, her grief hardening into steel. But she needed one more answer, one more piece to make sense of their betrayal. Back at the estate, she slipped into Olivia's room, a space dripping with designer excess, silk dresses, pearl necklaces, a world Lorraine had never fit into. Her heart pounded as she opened a jewelry box, drawn by instinct. There, among glittering baubles, was Edward's wedding ring, its gold band etched with their initials. The sight was a dagger, twisting in her gut. Why would Olivia keep it, unless she believed Edward was gone forever, a trophy of their crime? "You thought you'd won," Lorraine whispered, her voice breaking, her fingers closing around the ring. The elite's sneers, Nathan's cold ambition, Olivia's scorn, they had all conspired to erase her, to claim a fortune that wasn't theirs. Lorraine stood, the ring a burning weight in her hand. The letter, the recording, the ring. They were threads in a tapestry of treachery, woven by the children she'd raised. She saw Edward's face, his smile defying the world that shunned their love. "You're stronger than their world," he'd told her. And now she believed it. Her pain was a fire, her betrayal a forge, shaping her into something unbreakable. She would follow Samuel's lead, confront the lies, and protect Edward's legacy. Nathan and Olivia had underestimated her, but they would learn. A black woman's heart, tempered by love and loss, was a force they could not outrun. Lorraine Carter's resolve burned fiercer than ever, a flame forged in the crucible of betrayal, as she sat in the shadowed dining room of their Beverly Hills estate. Edward's letter, Nathan's chilling voice on Samuel Reed's recording, and the glint of his wedding ring in Olivia's jewelry box had stripped away the last illusions of her adopted children's love. The pain was a living thing, clawing at her heart, but it was no match for the fury now coursing through her veins. Nathan and Olivia, the babies she'd rocked to sleep, had plotted to kill Edward for his fortune, and now she sensed they were coming for her. The elite world that shunned her black skin had taught them well. Her place in their gilded circle was a flaw to be erased. Yet Lorraine was no pawn. She was a warrior, and their lies would not break her. The phone rang, shattering the silence. Nathan's voice, smooth as polished marble, came through. "Mom, we're worried about you. Come to dinner at my place tonight. We need to talk." Lorraine's grip tightened, her pulse racing. His concern was a mask. She'd heard the truth in his recorded words, cold and calculated. Olivia's voice chimed in. "Saccharine, please, Mom, we just want to help you through this." Help her? The words were venom, dripping with the same deceit she'd caught in their shifty glances at the hospital. She agreed, her voice steady, but her heart pounded with a new fear. Edward's letter had warned her to trust no one, and the memory of his ring in Olivia's possession was a dagger in her gut. Were they planning to silence her too? At Nathan's opulent mansion, the air was thick with pretense. The dining table gleamed with crystal and silver, a stark contrast to the modest meals Lorraine had cooked for them as children. Nathan, in a tailored suit, poured wine with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Olivia, her blonde hair cascading over a silk gown, offered a platter of roasted lamb, her voice overly sweet. "You haven't been eating, Mom. Try this." Lorraine's stomach churned, the memory of Olivia's recorded laugh. "She'll be easy to handle," echoing in her mind. She pushed the plate away, her voice firm. "I'm not hungry." Their eyes flickered, a shared glance of irritation, and Lorraine's fear sharpened. Had they laced the food as they'd drugged Edward's coffee before his crash? Her heart thundered, each beat a warning to stay vigilant. Nathan leaned forward, his tone patronizing. "Mom, you're not yourself. We've spoken to a lawyer. You're grieving, and at your age it's affecting your judgment." Lorraine's breath caught, fury rising like a tide. At her age, it was a thinly veiled jab, not just at her 60 years, but at her blackness, her place in their world. Olivia chimed in, her smile cold. "We've consulted Dr. Langley. He says you might need care, a facility for your own good." A facility. The words were a slap, echoing the elite's disdain, as if Lorraine's strength, her love, her very existence were liabilities to be locked away. They wanted her gone, out of the estate, out of the fortune, their greed laid bare. Her hands clenched, nails digging into her palms, as she fought to keep her voice even. "I'm perfectly fine." The room felt smaller, the chandelier's light casting shadows that danced like specters of betrayal. Lorraine saw them as they once were. Nathan clinging to her after a nightmare, his small face buried in her shoulder. Olivia, giggling as Lorraine braided her hair. Those children were gone, replaced by strangers whose eyes gleamed with the same contempt she'd faced at galas, where whispers branded her an outsider. Their plot to declare her unfit, to steal Edward's legacy, was a mirror of that world's cruelty. Yet Edward's words in his letter, "I love you always," were a lifeline, anchoring her against their lies. She would not let them win. Her phone buzzed in her purse, a discreet vibration that jolted her. Another message from Samuel Reed. "They're planning more. Stay sharp." Lorraine's heart leapt, fear and resolve intertwining. She excused herself, claiming a headache, and left Nathan's mansion, her steps quick despite the weight of her dread. Outside, under the starless Beverly Hills sky, she called Marcus. "They're trying to lock me away," she whispered, her voice trembling but fierce. "They think I'm weak, but they're wrong." Marcus's gruff voice steadied her. "We'll get them, Lorraine. Samuel's got more evidence." She nodded, though he couldn't see, her resolve now a blazing fire. She remembered Edward's touch, his voice on their balcony. "You're stronger than their world." That strength surged within her, a vow to unravel their plot. As she drove back to the estate, the city's lights blurred through her tears. Nathan and Olivia had underestimated her, seeing only a black woman they could discard. But Lorraine was more, Edward's partner, a mother who'd loved fiercely, a survivor of their world's scorn. The dinner, their false concern, their lawyer's threat, they were pieces of a trap she would not fall into. She clutched the steering wheel, her heart a storm of pain and purpose. The truth was close, and she would seize it, for Edward, for the love they'd built against all odds. Nathan and Olivia's lies would crumble, and Lorraine would be there to see them fall. Lorraine Carter's heart burned with a fierce resolve, tempered by the fire of Nathan and Olivia's betrayal, as she stood in the Beverly Hills church, its vaulted ceiling echoing with hollow hymns. The sting of their false concern at Nathan's dinner, their lawyer's threat to lock her away, still lingered like a bruise. She'd clutched Edward's letter and ring, proof of their treachery, vowing to unravel their lies. Now surrounded by the elite mourners whose whispers branded her an outsider, Lorraine felt the weight of her black skin more than ever. Their eyes, sharp with judgment, saw only a widow to pity, not a woman poised to fight. But the truth was close. She could feel it, a pulse beneath the church's polished facade, waiting to break free. Edward's words, "You're stronger than their world," were her armor, and she wore it with defiance, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The mahogany coffin gleamed before her, its sealed lid a silent taunt. Lorraine's fingers grazed its surface, trembling with grief and suspicion, seeking some trace of Edward. Nathan and Olivia stood nearby, their sobs a performance for the crowd. But Lorraine caught their truth. Nathan's broad shoulders shook too perfectly, his blonde hair catching the light, while Olivia's handkerchief hid a smirk, her fair skin glowing with triumph. Their whispered exchange sliced through the organ's drone. "When she signs, it's all our," Nathan hissed, his voice low but sharp. Olivia's stifled giggle was a blade, cutting Lorraine's heart anew. Her children, the ones she'd raised with love, were vultures circling a fortune they hadn't earned. The elite's disdain paled against this betrayal, their greed a mirror of the world that shunned her. Her phone buzzed in her purse, a jolt that snapped her from her pain. She fumbled for it, her breath catching as the screen lit up with words that stopped her heart. "I am still alive. Trust no one." The message from Samuel Reed's number was a thunderbolt shattering her grief. Edward, alive? The possibility was a wildfire, burning through her doubt. She stared at the coffin, its sealed lid now a lie, a question mark that screamed louder than the pastor's sermon. Her pulse roared, drowning out the hymns. Was it empty? The thought was a weight, crushing yet exhilarating. She stepped forward, her voice trembling but firm. "Open the coffin. I need to see him." The mourners gasped, their whispers turning to murmurs. But Lorraine didn't care. The truth was all that mattered now. The funeral director hesitated, his eyes darting to Nathan and Olivia, who froze, their faces paling. "Mrs. Carter, it's not customary," he stammered, but Lorraine's glare silenced him. "Do it," she said, her voice a steel blade. As the lid creaked open, revealing an empty velvet interior, the church erupted in shocked murmurs. Lorraine's world tilted, relief and horror crashing together. Empty. Edward wasn't there. Nathan's sob choked off, his eyes wide with panic, while Olivia's handkerchief fell, her smirk replaced by dread. Before Lorraine could speak, the church doors swung open with a bang. Edward Harrington stepped in, alive, his presence a thunderclap that silenced the crowd. Flanked by police, his silver hair gleamed under the stained glass light, his eyes locking onto Lorraine with a love that pierced her soul. Nathan stumbled back, his face ashen, a strangled cry escaping his lips. Olivia's scream tore through the church, her body collapsing against a pew, her silk gown crumpling like her facade. Lorraine's heart leapt, tears spilling as she ran to Edward, his arms enveloping her, warm and real. "I'm here, my love," he whispered, his voice a balm to her wounds. The mourners stared, their judgment forgotten in the face of this miracle. Edward turned to the crowd, his voice steady but laced with pain. "My children tried to kill me for money, but they failed." Samuel Reed stepped forward, his trench coat stark against the church's opulence, and played a recording. Nathan's voice filled the air. "The breaks are done. He won't survive." Olivia's laugh followed. "She'll be next." Lorraine's breath hitched, the betrayal a fresh wound, but Edward's hand in hers anchored her. He explained, his voice heavy. "I suspected their greed. Samuel found the mechanic they paid, the pills they used. I escaped the crash and hid to protect you." Lorraine's heart ached, not just for the plot, but for the children she'd lost to greed. She saw them as they were, Nathan's shy grin at the orphanage, Olivia's giggles in her arms, now ghosts replaced by strangers. The police moved in, handcuffs clicking around Nathan and Olivia's wrists, Their pleas, "Mom, please," were hollow, drowned by their own lies. Lorraine's tears fell, but her resolve held. She'd loved them, but their betrayal, rooted in the elite's scorn for her blackness, had severed that bond. As they were led away, she clung to Edward, her heart a storm of relief and sorrow, but unyielding in its pursuit of justice. Lorraine Carter stood in the hushed courtroom, her heart a tangled knot of relief and sorrow, Edward's hand warm in hers as they faced the wreckage of their family. The church's thunderclap moment, his return, the empty coffin, Nathan and Olivia's ashen faces as police led them away, still echoed in her soul, a wound that bled anew with each step toward justice. The Beverly Hills courthouse, with its marble columns and polished floors, was another stage for the elite's scrutiny, their whispers trailing Lorraine like shadows. Her black skin marked her as an outsider, a widow who dared to defy their world's rules. Yet she stood tall, Edward's love her shield against their judgment. The trial of their adopted children, Nathan and Olivia, was not just a reckoning for their crimes, but a mirror to the greed that had torn their family apart. Lorraine's resolve burned, but her heart ached for the children she'd lost. The courtroom buzzed with tension, the air heavy with anticipation as the prosecutor laid out the case. Samuel Reed's recordings played, Nathan's cold voice chilling the room. "The breaks are done. He won't survive." Olivia's laugh followed, sharp and cruel. "She'll be next." Lorraine's breath caught, the betrayal slicing through her like a blade. She saw them in the dock. Nathan's blonde head bowed, Olivia's fair skin pale under the harsh lights. Their eyes avoided hers, but she felt their weight, the ghosts of the children she'd raised. She remembered Nathan's shy grin at the orphanage, Olivia's giggles as Lorraine braided her hair. Those memories were a dagger, twisting with each damning word from the recordings. The prosecutor's voice was relentless. They planned Edward Harrington's murder for $150 million, targeting Lorraine next to secure the fortune. Lorraine's tears fell silently, her hand tightening in Edward's. He squeezed back, his presence a lifeline, but his eyes held a storm of pain. "They were our children," he whispered, his voice breaking. The elite mourners in the gallery whispered too, their glances sharp with disdain, as if Lorraine's grief was a spectacle, her blackness a flaw in their pristine world. She'd endured their sneers at galas, their murmurs that she didn't belong, but this was different. Nathan and Olivia had learned that disdain, their greed a reflection of the elite's scorn. They'd plotted to kill Edward, to erase her, all for money they felt entitled to. The pain was physical, a weight crushing her chest, yet she refused to break. She was Lorraine Carter, a woman who'd loved fiercely, and she would face this truth head-on. The defense tried to paint Nathan and Olivia as misguided, driven by desperation, but the evidence was ironclad. Samuel Reed testified, his voice steady. "Edward hired me to watch them. He knew their greed, their contempt for Lorraine." The mechanic who sabotaged the brakes took the stand, his confession stark. "Nathan paid me $60,000. Olivia gave me the pills to drug him." Lorraine's heart lurched, the memory of Edward's ring and Olivia's jewelry box a fresh wound. She saw them as they were. Nathan, clinging to her after nightmares. Olivia dancing in her arms. How had love turned to this? The judge's gavel fell, the verdict ringing out. Guilty of attempted murder and fraud, 15 years each. Nathan's shoulders slumped, Olivia's sob echoed, but Lorraine felt no triumph, only a hollow ache. After the trial, letters arrived from prison, scrawled in Nathan's sharp script and Olivia's delicate hand. "Mom, Dad, we're sorry," Nathan wrote. "Greed blinded us. We failed you." Olivia's words were softer. "We didn't deserve your love. Forgive us." Lorraine read them alone, her tears staining the pages. She saw their faces as children, their trust in her, and the pain was a storm, threatening to drown her. Edward held her, his voice gentle. "They don't deserve your tears, but we can choose peace." Together they penned a response, Lorraine's hand trembling. "We forgive you, not for you, but for us. You have a chance to change, but you are no longer our children." The words were a release, a severance of a bond that had broken her heart. Forgiveness was not absolution. It was a gift to themselves, a way to heal without carrying their poison. Lorraine felt the weight lift, her soul lighter, though the loss lingered. She remembered a night in their garden, Edward's arms around her as they watched the stars. "We're enough for each other," he'd said, defying the world that scorned their love. Now that love was her strength, a fire that no betrayal could extinguish. The courtroom's whispers faded as she stood beside Edward, their hands entwined. Nathan and Olivia had chosen greed over family, but Lorraine and Edward chose forgiveness, not for them, but to reclaim their peace. The elite's judgment, the children's betrayal, they could not dim the love that had carried them through. Lorraine's heart, though scarred, beat with a quiet resolve, ready to rebuild from the ashes of their pain. Lorraine Carter stood on the sprawling lawn of their Beverly Hills estate, her heart lighter than it had been since the courtroom's heavy verdict, yet still bearing the scars of Nathan and Olivia's betrayal. Forgiving them had been a release, a severance of a bond that had broken her, but disowning them left an ache that lingered like a quiet bruise. Edward's hand, warm and steady in hers, anchored her to a new beginning. The elite world's whispers, once sharp with disdain for her black skin, faded against the laughter of children now echoing through their transformed home. The pain of their adopted children's greed, their plot to kill Edward for insurance money, had forged Lorraine into something unbreakable. A woman who'd faced the abyss and chosen hope. She was no longer just a widow or a mother betrayed. She was a beacon, her love for Edward a fire that no treachery could extinguish. The estate, once a fortress of wealth, was now a community center, its marble halls filled with the chatter of nurses and the squeals of children from underserved neighborhoods. Lorraine and Edward had poured their fortune into medical clinics, honoring his rewritten will that prioritized the poor over the privileged. The grand dining room where Nathan and Olivia had once schemed now hosted free health screenings, its chandeliers casting light on faces of every color. Lorraine walked through the center, her simple dress a stark contrast to the opulence, her dark skin a proud emblem in a world that had tried to diminish her. She paused at a mural painted by local youth, a vibrant tribute to healing, its colors mirroring the hope she felt. Her heart swelled, the weight of loss lifting with each smile she saw. She remembered the nights she'd sat with Edward, planning this dream before their world fractured. "We'll give back," he'd said, his silver hair catching the moonlight, his voice defying the elite who scorned their union. "Our love is bigger than their judgment." Lorraine had believed him, her nurse's heart beating for those who needed care most. Now that vision was real, each clinic a testament to their defiance of a world that saw her blackness as lesser. But the ache for Nathan and Olivia lingered. She saw them as children, Nathan's shy grin when she baked him cookies, Olivia's giggles as they danced in the kitchen. Those memories were ghosts, haunting her with what might have been. Yet their betrayal, their cold voices planning Edward's death, had severed that past. Forgiveness had freed her, but love demanded boundaries. Edward joined her, his presence a balm to her wounds. "You've made this real, Lorraine," he said, his eyes soft with pride. She smiled, tears pricking, and squeezed his hand. The elite's whispers had never broken them, nor had their children's greed. They'd faced the courtroom, heard Nathan and Olivia's hollow apologies, and chosen peace over vengeance. Lorraine had written those final words. "We forgive you, for us, not you." Disowning them was not cruelty. It was survival, a reclaiming of their hearts from those who'd chosen money over family. She felt the weight of that choice, heavy but necessary, like shedding a skin that no longer fit. Her love for Edward, unyielding through years of prejudice, was her true anchor now. The center's opening ceremony drew a crowd, families from Compton, nurses like Lorraine once was, and a few elite who'd softened their stares. Lorraine stood before them, her voice steady. "This is for those who've been forgotten, for the love that outlasts betrayal." The applause was a tide washing over her, and she felt Edward's arm around her, his strength a mirror to her own. She saw their old life, the galas where she'd endured slurs, the dinners where Nathan sneered at her cooking, Olivia's refusal to hug her. Those wounds had healed, not with time, but with purpose. The center was their legacy, a defiance of the elite's scorn and their children's treachery. Lorraine's heart, once shattered, now beat with a quiet joy, each pulse a vow to live for something greater. As children played in the center's garden, their laughter mingling with the hum of medical equipment, Lorraine felt a peace she hadn't known since the hospital's sterile halls. She remembered Edward's touch, his voice on their balcony. "You're stronger than their world." She was. She'd faced Nathan and Olivia's lies, the elite's judgment, and emerged whole. The community center was more than brick and mortar. It was a testament to their love, a beacon for those the world overlooked. Lorraine's tears fell, not from pain, but from pride. She was a black woman who defied a world that tried to break her, standing beside the man who'd chosen her against all odds. Together, they'd turned betrayal into hope, their legacy a light that would never dim. Lorraine and Edward's story, a tapestry woven from love, betrayal, and redemption, leaves us with a truth as enduring as their bond. No darkness can dim a heart that chooses light. Their journey through greed and prejudice, from an empty coffin to a community reborn, speaks to the strength within us all. What moved you most? Was it Lorraine's courage, Edward's defiance, or their choice to forgive yet stand firm? Share your thoughts below. Your voice matters in this tale of triumph. Thank you for walking this path with us, for feeling their pain and hope. Your support fuels these stories, and I'm grateful for every heartbeat you've shared. Stay tuned for more tales of hearts unbroken, where truth and love prevail. Until we meet again, keep seeking your own light.